Well, Timm Smith, welcome to Blister headquarters.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate the invite.
So our work here today is to learn more about the origin story of Voormi and kind of run it all the way up to today, why you started and what you're working on now. And, so why don't we do that and just start with this origin story of Voormi. When did the company start? Why did the company start?
Sure thing. Yeah. So if you look at the outdoor industry on whole, there are some amazing stories about people who lived a lifestyle that a lot of people wish they could, that had a problem, that invented something and started a company. Right. I mean, I think there are so many stories, starting from the inception of the industry itself. Our story's different, quite frankly, and we're really proud of that. And so if you rewind to the founding of the company was founded in 2010. At the time, the outdoor industry had gone through an interesting transformation, if you will. The financial crisis that had hit 2008, had basically left the industry, for lack of a better term, consolidated. There were a small handful of brands. They were buying from a small handful of factories, buying from even smaller handful of textile mills. And ultimately, from our perspective, if you had walked outdoor retailer in 2010, it was a sea of sameness, right? And from our perspective, what that left empty was not only a lack of innovation for the people who it really mattered for. I mean, sure, if your goal was to fill a retail shop with a whole bunch of product and have, a whole lot of specialty gear that only worked if you had a lot of it, it was a booming time for the industry. But what we felt had been left behind was really the folks who relied on their gear, who woke up every single day, who lived in it, who worked in it, and then for folks who were looking for the kind of innovation that we had seen in other parts of our lives. I mean, I reflect, how long ago was it when we never even had a conception that we'd hail a car with our iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. This rate of change that had been driven through the tech industry. I mean, we wanted to see that in the outdoor industry. That was our vision. It was really to try and drive transformational change, go further back in the supply chain, innovate deeper, truly do things that were different, and pair that and couple that with an authenticity that would speak to the folks who actually woke up every day and relied on their gear.
It's interesting when you talk about a lack of innovation in kind of the, I guess, apparel industry. I mean, I immediately go to like membranes, where I feel like we have heard about and seen, maybe it's sometimes pretty subtle iterations or whatever, kind of more on the membrane front. So I'm just trying to think of another like apparel company that might be like, what are you talking about? Like, we've been innovating on materials. So how would you address that? Like, when you're talking about a lack of material innovation, and I respond like, well, what about membranes?
Sure. Well, and I think this is an important distinction, and I'm glad you brought it up, between maybe what we mean by the word innovation and what we mean by invention, right? And if you rewind back to the invention of membranes, I mean, that's a 1978 invention, right? And after 1978, after this new method of make was created, the next 30, 40, 50 years, that's then incrementally innovating off of that basic platform. And from our perspective, what was lacking in the industry was not an innovative spirit. It wasn't the desire to take one more step forward. It was that appetite, that passion to really take that giant leap forward, to invent the next method of make in the industry, the next class of materials that after doing that drives 40 more years of true innovation beyond that.
Huh. So before we get too deep into this conversation, we should probably back up for a second and talk about your role at Voormi. What do you do there? Do you do the same thing now that you kind of came onto the squad for? And you were there from the beginning or early days?
Yeah, sure was. Yeah, we so my role at Voormi, I essentially am responsible for and wake up every day thinking about, textile technology, right? So, I would look at materials, I'd look at new ways of making textiles and fabrics, and then looking at then how those materials translate into garments. It's has my role evolved? Absolutely. I think it always does. As you start with a small team at a company, you wear so many hats, and to this day, we still all wear a whole lot of hats. But as we now transition into this next phase, as we start to take some of the things we've been foundationally doing for the last, 7-8 years, and taking the next level, my job will continually shift towards waking up every day and trying to make our materials do things they've never done before.
So you're kind of the head material guy, product guy. Would that be the same? Were you thinking of those things interchangeably?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I would say if you're in a traditional clothing company, the way materials are developed, you start with some sketch of a product. Ultimately, I want to make a jacket that looks like this, and then from there you back brief all the materials. Right. That's how 99% of material companies apparel companies run. We do it a little differently. We start by building a new textile or new material, and then once we have that new material built, then also through our investment that we've made in our own cut and sew facilities, it's our job to go figure out what to go make out of that fabric. And that honestly is truly a team effort. There's everybody in the company in some way is involved in something that they're passionate about and love to do. And so, it really is, once we have that material, bringing that material to life in products, that's the job of everybody in the company, quite frankly.
So it is, let's figure out cool new materials first, then we decide what would be the most interesting applications of those materials.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what do they want to be? And it's hard to know that, when you're kind of in some uncharted space, for sure.
And where are you making your products?
Yeah, so we made a decision as a company early on to do everything in the United States. So at the time, it was a hard thing to do, and it took a whole lot of hard work to push that rock up a hill. But we made that decision for two reasons. One was agility, and the second was self-reliance, right? And so, traditional product cycles, somebody comes into the room, briefs, that would be about 2023 right now. And then the process would start, the designers would design, the material developers would go take their quarterly trips overseas and go look through fabric showrooms. We wanted to set up a much more agile supply chain. We wanted to be able to try new things, do new things, beta tests, make small batches of things before we made big batches of things. And the way to do that for us was to do it in the US. It ultimately also drove something that we're also really passionate about, which is this idea of self-reliance. I just took this road trip, up to our Bozeman office. Here I am. I could have woken up that day. I could have turned on this magical piece of technology in my pocket. I never would have had to look at where Bozeman was relative to our office in Pagosa Springs, and it would have given me turn-by-turn directions, probably told me where to stop for dinner, and found a hotel along the way. Yet at the same time, there was value in pulling the map out a week before the trip, really figuring out what was around the area, where do these things sit relative to each other? What could we do along the way, right? And if the satellites fell out of the sky, you know what? We're still going to get there, so to speak. Yeah. And I feel like in the apparel industry, it's very much been set up with these intricate, complex global supply chains that, if one piece of the puzzle doesn't come together, the whole thing falls apart. And I think, we've all experienced in the last 6 months, the network went down. It's been a weird time for everybody. And to be able to walk into our team and say, guess what? This is a situation. We need to double down. We're going to make more, or we're going to repurpose Pagosa Springs, and we're going to make a whole new breed of gator that can act as a face mask, so that, in our small town, we have more options. That's the kind of agility you get out of making the early upfront investment in doing things yourself and doing it more locally. And ultimately, when times get tough, that's when you look back and the hard work was worth it.
So let's talk about materials. You guys came in with some pretty specific things in mind. And so talk about that. And then I'm also interested in, you have a patent, a materials patent, which is kind of surprising and impressive to me. So talk to me about both of those things and what you're working with.
Yeah, sure thing. So when we started the company back in 2010, we, as I mentioned, had kind of a charter to find new ways to make things. Our theory was, if we just went and bought fabric off a header cart out of some textile mill somewhere in the world, that it was going to look like everybody else's stuff, and we won't really have pushed the ball forward. So ultimately we made the decision to go invest at the textile development level. Our idea at the time, was that essentially merino wool had really been experiencing a resurgence. It was not your grandfather's wool anymore. Right. It was now seen as a performance fiber. But yet at the same time, it was pretty relegated to socks and underwear. It was too weak, too water absorbing to be used in outerwear applications. And so it was a part of the story, but not the whole story. When we focused on developing new processes, new methods to make, what we chose to do was to go take natural fibers like merino wool, like other natural fibers, and basically put them into 21st century manufacturing processes and pair them with other advanced materials. This process we ended up calling a precision blending process. The idea that you take a pure merino wool fiber, you take a pure high-performance wicking fiber or a fiber designed for abrasion resistance, and in the knitting machine, you basically float these things, to the surface if you want them on the surface, next to the skin if you want them next to skin. And we ended up creating these extremely kind of complex merino wool-based structures. And that was the foundation of the company. It was really all about kind of trying to stick things in machines that were never meant to have them. It led to the patent you asked about, which is our core construction technology. Imagine, if you will, we've now got a couple years of experience under our belt. I'm going to take this merino wool fiber, I'm going to stick it into the machine, I'm going to put it in the middle, I'm going to put a wicking fiber and float it next to skin. Well, that all works until you find yourself in some sort of inclement weather. And so now we needed to start talking membranes. We needed to start talking weather protection. And the idea was hatched, why don't we just stick a membrane into the knitting machine? Why has it been done so many times over the years where you have to make a textile, you have to make another textile, you have to make a membrane, you have to glue them all together, you have these laminated constructions that are loud, they're crunchy, they're stiff, they're the last thing we all want to pull out of the closet. So why not? Why not think about it differently? Why not stick that membrane right into the machine, create the knit around it? You eliminate the need for glue. The membrane's basically protected in the middle. And then we have some patented processes then after that where we can reseal some of those holes that you create, right? You can reestablish the integrity of the membrane. You can, kind of, if you will, do things to it to kind of finish it. So that's where our patents lie, this brand new process. It's in its initial launch, we basically said, well, if you don't have glue, it's not stiff, it's not crunchy, why couldn't we make something that had the comfort of a sweater, the protection of a shell? And that ultimately spawned the first products out of the gate. But what it also did is it got a lot of folks thinking, well, what else could you put in the middle? So in a way, if you kind of rewind 1978 or whenever the idea of gluing things together was invented, here we are. We're kind of standing on that horizon again. We've got a new way to put things together. What should we do, right? And so you have folks going, well, why not take carbon fiber and put it together with something that's not a membrane, right? What does that do? Well, now we're opening up to other industries. It's not just apparel. There's, medical applications. There's all sorts of, now in this new world we live in, personal protective applications. And so, really, it's kind of like, standing on this horizon, not necessarily knowing what's out in front of you, but knowing you probably have 30 or 40 years to go innovate on top of it.
So maybe I misspoke a minute ago, because did I say you have a materials patent?
Yep.
This isn't a materials patent, it's a process patent.
And both. Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah. So in the world of patents, you have the way you do things, and you have the things that you did, right? And we covered the landscape on all those as well, and we continue each day to file new ideas on top of the base patent as well.
So, just to try to clarify with this, I mean, if you're doing this blend, right, and it's kind of interesting because it seems like a lot of the marketing we see out there from other companies and the rest is like 100% merino, right? 100% merino. And it's like, well, these guys over here are talking about blending and bringing in other fabrics and the rest. So maybe the question is, why bother with merino at all?
Sure. Yeah. So to answer your first question, which is kind of about why blend, I think it's really important. Concrete without rebar doesn't really do you much good, right? And so if you had a pure concrete patio, it'd fall apart in 2 years. Similarly, merino wool has some limitations, right? So it's a naturally weak fiber. If you try and get merino wool too thin, too fine, there's not much of it in the world, and typically things you make out of it in a pure sense don't last that long. Not good from a performance standpoint, not good from a sustainability standpoint. So this idea of bringing merino together with other things, that's really where that comes from. As to why merino, quite honestly, it's got a structure that is yet to be replicated by man. It's if you were to take a merino wool fiber, take the hair right off the sheet, if you were to cut that and then look inside of it in the cross section, what you would see is in the center of the fiber, there's essentially a material that loves water. It wants to absorb 30% of its weight in water. I mean, it just wants to soak that water up, right? Which like cotton, would be terrible if you didn't have the other part of the fiber, which is the shell. So on the shell, that shell hates water. And what happens when you sweat into merino wool is essentially your sweat comes off your skin as vapor. It crosses that first layer, that shell that hates water, just kind of lets it go through, absorbs in on the inside of the fiber. That water then is protected, right? It's not touching your skin. It's not filling the air pockets in between the fibers and destroying all your thermal insulation. It's why wool is warm when it's wet. And then it re-evaporates again. And when it re-evaporates again, it kind of takes that heat with it, and it ultimately ends up regulating temperature really well. So wool is always, because of its hyper evolved, if you will, fiber shape and material structure, it's constantly working to pull moisture, absorb it where you want it, not where you don't, re-evaporate that moisture, take the heat with it. It's why if you wear a merino wool sweater, you can go indoors, come indoors, go outdoors, and you never really feel that plasticky, hot, sweaty feeling. That's the magic of merino wool. It also doesn't tend to hold odor, right? Which is especially powerful when you're in the backcountry or you have something that needs to last a long time. In our current neck gaiters, which have been a kind of a runaway success for us, it means I can wear that neck gaiter 3 or 4 days, use it as a mask, and then toss it in the washer and not have to constantly be using disposable things or washing all the time. And so it's got a lot of properties we like. All the thermal regulating properties, all the moisture regulating properties. It's got some things that, are its Achilles heel, and we just use, an engineered approach to try and essentially reinforce those or work around them, much like rebar and concrete does.
Huh. Is there anything else we should talk about on like just the straight materials side before we move into talking about some specific products that you want to show us and tell us about?
Well, I think we could use the products almost as context, because really, ultimately, at the end of the day, materials are materials until they become products, right?
Fair enough. Let's do that then. I asked you, coming in, I just said, you're the product and materials guy, so bring in some of your favorites and tell us about what's going on and why you think they're particularly interesting. So what do you got?
Yeah, so I brought a couple different things. From our perspective, again, as you think about merino wool kind of previously being relegated to socks and underwear, now truly capable as a performance fabric, there's a lot of different ways you can take it, right? And what's ironic is if you look at how we started as a company, our first product, this was the high-E hoodie. Mm-hmm. This was the first product we ever made. So R&D 2010 to 2013, launched this product 2013. This has become a workhorse for us. We started the company as a winter backcountry brand. That was at the heart of everything we did. This is from a precision blending perspective. It's merino wool. On the inside, when we are running that machine, we insert a fiber that's designed to wick moisture. That fiber floats to the inside surface. So if you open up our high-E hoodie and you look on the inside, touching your skin is a high-performance wicking fiber. We nap that and fleece it for some thermal performance. You can get it in various weights. On the outside of the product, we float in an abrasion-resistant nylon fiber. We push it and interlace it on the outside of the fabric. And what that does is it creates a super highly abrasion-resistant surface on the outside. And then we treat that whole thing with a water repellent treatment that works across all those different fibers, which is pretty hard to do. And what you get in the end of the day is a non-laminated, non-glued construction that on the inside delivers you thermal moisture wicking performance. On the outside is hardened for abrasion, for backpack straps, beacon harnesses, all the other stuff we're going to throw at it. And kind of at the core of it all, in the middle of it all, is this merino wool, which is just pushing moisture from a thermal perspective and just regulating. The high-E has a balaclava-style hood. So this is protect away and shove yourself away from the elements. Again, winter backcountry travel inspired. It's got a pass-through kangaroo pocket for tucking away. It's got integrated thumb loops. So from a feature and performance perspective, it's got kind of all the things you need and none of the things that you don't. From this product, we do lighter weight versions without hoods, our Access pullover, which we've just launched a brand new version of for 2020 for aerobic applications. And then we have warmer full zip ones. We've just launched a 2020 drift jacket, which is more kind of be your thicker, warmer, more insulative layer. So then, engineering in all the different thermal levels. So that's the high-E hoodie. That was kind of how the company started.
Early in the conversation, you were talking about, we were looking at the market and we wanted to see if we could make something that wasn't that kind of crunchy, hard, highly weather protective piece, but didn't have a very soft hand feel, was kind of crinkly, whatever.
Yeah.
So that piece, how much weather protection are we getting out of that?
Yeah, this is kind of like your 80% of days. Yeah. If you will, piece. It's, if you think about the genre of soft shell, it's almost in a way delivering that kind of fleece-like comfort, soft shell-like protection, for the 80 to 90% scenario.
But you're not going ski touring in a driving snowstorm or like God forbid you're ski touring in the rain, happens sometimes. But that's not what that piece is designed for.
Yeah, it's really, it's designed for what I would call kind of heavy snow. But if you're driving rain, if you're kind of in that transitional BC climate, it is really designed to be that kind of workhorse of a mid layer that delivers that extra level of protection. Throw on the shell if things get terribly, terribly bad.
Yep.
Right. But again, if you think about it, it's probably covering 85% of the days you're going to have touring.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, and I this is probably my primary touring piece for variable weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if you're pretty sure you're going to be getting snowed on at some point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Because the other thing about wool's got a really interesting dynamic with DWR. It just typical DWR tends to fail then wet, and then you're wet.
Yep.
Right. The DWR in this particular scenario, the water shedding component, it's defense line one, but remember you're in wool, so you're in kind of warm, whole nother mechanism of moisture regulation. And so, the common nylon soft shell, when it fails, this will go the distance, right? And so we find for most people, the shell comes out of the bag, not very much. Yeah. Even when folks are, quite honestly, doing big high alpine stuff.
Where do we go next?
So if that was the birth of the company, kind of winter backcountry travel, comfort of a fleece, protection, and better than a soft shell. One of the things that happened to us as a company, and I think it's one of the cool things about being located where we are in Southwest Colorado, we didn't choose to put the company near a port city where it was easy to monitor what was coming in on a container. We chose to put the company where the people using the products truly are, right? And it's why, this drive today took 3 hours as opposed to having to get on an airplane. And one of the things you get when you're in those communities and what you realize is that, the same folks who hang up the skis when the winter ends, are guiding the rivers when they flow, right? And when the rivers slow down, they're fishing guides. And then when hunting season rolls around, they're hunting guides, right? And so we kept getting requests from, quite honestly, our guys that were guiding the Grand to essentially come up with a summer weight piece, right? We had to go back into textile development to do it. This is what I mentioned earlier. It was the idea that if you drive merino wool so fine, you lose all of its durability. Could we, quote unquote, kind of structurally reinforce wool with another fiber? So that's the rebar in the concrete analogy that we talked about earlier. Yeah. And then float a wicking fiber to the inside. And what that allowed us to do is drive the weight of the garment down, drive the weight of the fabric down. We're probably 30% lighter than the lightest merino wool products out there because we are reinforced. And then what actually touches your skin, if you look at the inside of these products, you'll notice it's a different color on the inside. That's because that's that next to skin high performance wicking fiber. So that's what's drawing that moisture off the skin. It's almost acting like kind of like a sports shirt when you need it to wick. Yet when the sun ducks away behind the clouds, the wind whips up, you still have that buffer that the merino wool provides. And this became not only a favorite for guys that were guiding the Grand, we've seen this thing show up in tropical climates. We've got a guy who leaves to go to Florida every year to guide tarpon. It's just kind of started to find its way all around the world. And ironically, it's become probably our best selling piece as a company, even though we started as a winter backcountry brand. You follow the water. And suddenly, there's more of these sold than probably any other thing that we have in the collection. And it's won all sorts of crazy awards. It truly is a versatile piece. It's the one I put it in the car and wore it here today.
I've got it on.
You've got yours on. So yeah. It's just the piece you want to wake up and put on every day. It's got couple cool things, integrated thumb loops. Yep. When you're rowing, and you've got kind of this motion going on, that way this keeps it down. It delivers anywhere between 30 and 50 SPF. It's a color dependent thing. So you're getting sun protection during the whole thing. And then the most recent version we put in this little kind of tuck button, which cinches the hood from a more high volume, hood that's going to kind of protect you from all the sun to, hey, the wind's whipping, you're on a boat, you're getting the worst of it, tuck away, if you will, which has also made it great for runners as well and trail runners. So it has truly become the piece that's kind of transcended activities. We've even got, how many Bluebird days we get here. You asked what I ski tour in. Yeah. A lot of days I ski tour in this, just because it's got that it's got that lightweight. You can sweat like heck in it, and it just doesn't hold that moisture and get soppy wet.
So, couple questions. One, did you say what the name of that piece is?
This is the River Run hoodie.
River Run hoodie.
And then we also offer the same fabric in a short sleeve version and an unhooded version. So you can get the short sleeve tech tee, the long sleeve tech tee, and the River Run hoodie.
And it is interesting. Like you were talking about, runners are using this. Mm-hmm. And again, just thinking back to like 100% merino pieces, like I personally never run in 100% merino, but I would run in this, right? Yeah. And so talk a little bit about like why tell me why I wouldn't, do that or like, cause it's a very different feel. It's a very different hand feel. And it clearly results in some different performance elements. So can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, so if this was, so to go 100% merino, the issue that you have is you have a problem driving weight down. So, without going to some exotic 11.5 micron wool that you can only get in one little farm in the world, it's really hard to drive the weight of the product that we can drive without that extra yarn or that extra fiber in there kind of keeping the whole thing structurally intact, right? So the reason you don't want to run in merino is because if they made it light enough that you'd want to run in pure merino, you get to run in it about 3 times if you had a pack on, and it would be shredded, right? And so by again engineering that composite, by putting in those structural fibers, it allows us to kind of go lighter and lighter. The second thing is, even if you did go source some super exotic merino, in order to get the knit structures to work, you have to pack that yarn so tight, you lose all the air permeability, you lose the breeziness of the fabric that you get out of the river run. And so it really is that kind of magical combination of being able to drive the weight down, create these under-constructed knits, and then put that wicking fiber next to your skin so it's drawing that moisture more actively, that takes it from a lightweight wool shirt to merino you can run in.
Got it. So this lets us go lighter and more durable. Those would be the 2 primary things?
Yeah, and more air permeable. Yeah. Without losing everything you love about merino wool. Again, I could try and take a merino wool yarn and do kind of the old way of blending, which is try and load it with a bunch of other stuff to make it stronger. But then you're down to like 20% merino and you've lost all the benefit, right? We can keep these merino contents high because we're only putting it where we want it, not where we don't.
Yeah. What's next?
Next, actually a reasonably new project for us, but I think it's a good follow-on story to the River Run, socks. So there's a lot of sock companies out there, right? There's a lot of merino wool sock companies out there, and I cannot tell you how many calls we had gotten, please make socks. And every single time we got a call, that's not our game. We don't do socks. We're not going to make a grid wall full of socks at every state flag on it. We're just not going to do it, right? Fast forward, we ran into some wild folks. We were at an event. It was in Denver, and we ran into some folks out of New Zealand who, 3rd generation family company, very culturally similar to ours. Dad was there, daughter was there, son was there. They're all at this event, and we're all drinking beers together. And we challenged these guys. We said, hey, I bet you can't make our base layer into a sock. So can you take that basic premise of taking merino wool, precision blending it, floating wicking fibers to the inside, leaving merino wool fibers on the outside, and basically make a base layer for your foot? That was the 3 beers in challenge, so to speak. Well, they took it on, right? We ended up, many Skype calls later, a couple visits later, and we ended up with this project to create what we have come to just believe is really the ultimate kind of end all be all for merino wool socks. And the idea again was to, if you look at the inside of our socks, you see the color difference. That's because that's that wicking sport fiber next to your skin, much like the River Run hoodie. On the outside is the merino wool. So you're in an endurance race. You have to get across a stream. You get wet. You don't get all the blistery stuff that goes on with merino wool next to your skin. You're getting that slick sport fiber next to your skin. It's moving moisture. Yet when you need the thermals, you have the thermals there as well. And so it's been a super cool project for us. We started with a ski sock, actually, which we still have. We did like a mid-calf light hike. We've done this trail sock, which I've got with me here, which is kind of more your mountain biking, trail running sock. And then we did a super low profile run sock. Are we going to be the company that has 100 socks on the wall? No.
Yeah. So I've actually run in the low profile kind of no-show sock. I've run and now mountain biked in it, actually.
Yeah.
Really interesting. But talk to me a little bit about the difference between that sock and this is a little thicker, or is this?
Yep. Yeah, it's a little thicker and it's a little higher profile, right? And so, the trick with the run socks, right, is that you got to have essentially this kind of full padding on the bottom deal, right? And so on that bottom surface of the run sock, we put full padding. We put the merino wool on the top. With this sock, which is more transitional into trail and mountain biking, it allowed us to essentially get the padding strategically heel and toe, which allowed us to wrap more of the merino wool, get the merino wool covering more of the foot, if you will, on the outside. And so, from a crossover perspective, it's just a little more versatile, right? Moving from trail to road versus the pure run sock, which you've tried. Yeah.
Cool. Where are we going?
So the last piece we brought today to share, again, we talked a little bit earlier about core construction technology. This is the Convex vest. This is really the workhorse that was born out of this new technology platform. The first thing you notice when you see this vest is that, if I were to tell you there was a membrane in it, you would probably never believe me, right? It's soft. It has the comfort of a sweater. Yet this thing's blocking 98% of the wind, 98% of the water, right? And so it's got integrated weather protective membrane. It really pairs well with other stuff in our collection. So a lot of times I'll take the core constructed Convex vest, I'll put it over the River Run, and you've kind of got this, go anywhere combo, if you will. Again, what makes it so powerful is that, I think in terms of a breathability hit, so we test these structures with and without membranes. We can actually not insert the membrane, but make the same structure. And so we take maybe a 10% hit in breathability, but we get 98% weather protection increase, right? So you get this huge disproportionate weather protection, wind, water, but from a breathability perspective, the thing feels like you're putting on a fleece.
It's so funny, and I found myself thinking about whiskey. And then I found myself thinking about, this isn't the first podcast where I found myself thinking about whiskey, but you've been talking about blending so much, right?
Yeah.
And it really is interesting to just, in the same way that like a whiskey distiller will work with these blends, what kind of performance, quality, feel, flavor do we want to give here? You're like, oh, we can give up a 10% breathability, but way bump up the weather protectiveness. And it's like, these are the decisions you guys just, I guess, get to sit around. And it sounds like you have quite a bit of ability to tinker and dial up or dial down some of these different performance aspects. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. There's a interesting story back. Our base layers, which I didn't bring with me today, but we'll be relaunching for this fall. Very, very similar story, right? So we built our first base layer technology. It was merino wool on the outside. It was high performance wicking fiber on the inside. And then we did this knit structure to kind of suck everything down and make it more elastic, more, I don't want to use the word compression, but kind of tighter fit to the body. We took it out the back door and put it on all the folks up at our local ski area and found out that the elbows were bagging out, after 3 or 4 days, right? So what did we do? Well, we went back and we engineered the textile. We dropped 2% Lycra in, ultimately, which gave it the recovery, but you don't want to put too much Lycra in because if you do, it just stops water, right? And so, we were able to fine tune that, much like your master distiller, to kind of get to that level. And I don't think you can do that if you're working on 2024, making stuff in a far off place, not connected, right? And so, we, in many ways, I think are really, really similar to anybody who's in that industry of kind of fine tuning things, whether you're roasting coffee beans or making whiskey. And ultimately, if we can take all that together and then make new processes like, hey, let's barrel age that in a cask, a wine cask, and what does that do?
Yeah.
That's that new kind of method to make, or new processes that we're always kind of seeking as well. So it's fine-tuning blends and then bringing new ways to do things, all at the same time.
A topic that's come up a lot, and I'm happy that it is coming up a lot, is talk about kind of responsible production and trying to build stuff, make stuff in a less harmful way, or figuring out how we can reduce impacts and the rest. Can you say a little bit about, how Voormi has been thinking about this, and, maybe some of the things you've done, or if you're more excited about some of the things you have coming forward, or where are you guys on the kind of responsible production front?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up. It's certainly, I would say, if not one of the top, maybe even the number one topic these days when folks sit down to think about making outdoor gear. And so much so that,
Wait, do you think at Voormi, or you think across the industry?
Across the industry.
Yeah.
I think people have, and not just the outdoor apparel industry. I mean, I think in our lives, we've just gotten so conscious about not only, what we have, but kind of how it got to us.
Yeah.
And I think there have been so many good things that have happened, even since the foundation of our company, in terms of, folks developing standards and folks trying to develop enforcement to those standards. And I think overall that just raises the bar for everyone. And certainly as we seek out our partners and our vendors, we're looking for all of those things. We're looking for blue sign. We're looking for all the things that, are the right thing to do. But at the heart of it, there's kind of what's the right thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. And it's, in a way, laws and enforcement, exist, but 99% of us wake up and do the right thing every single day. And so that's the philosophy that drives us at Voormi. It's do all the foundational things that we need to do, but really in the end of the day, how do you think about sustainability in the context more holistically and doing the right thing? And for us, it really comes down to a few different things. It's make less. It's make it last longer, not so long that it's here centuries after we die, and make it matter, right? And so I think we talked a little bit earlier, if we haven't yet, about our about kind of our approach to manufacturing. We don't do what typically the industry is set up to do, which is overproduce and then discount. Our model's not set up that way. We're producing to demand. We're doing it in very deliberate and scaled production. And so, if we sell out of River Run hoodies, we make more River Run hoodies, right? If we sell out of socks, we make more socks. You won't see our products discounted because we don't make too many of them, right? And so, it's our belief that's the first thing you can do in the world of sustainability is don't make it if you don't have to. And then the second thing is make it last, right? And so, I think the idea that kind of durability is the new sustainability is something that we have been passionate about since the beginning. If you have to make 5 to last the same length of time to make 1, from a total impact perspective, I'll take the 1 every day and all day long. And it doesn't necessarily matter if the 5 things came from a plastic bottle that was recycled or not. It's still 5 things that ended up in the landfill, right? And so from our perspective, durability of the product is key and so important. So it is one of the kind of foundational tenets. That said, I made the comment of make it last, but make it not last for centuries. Again, that's why you asked about merino wool and benefits. Merino wool, 80 days in a landfill. Polyester, 80 years in a landfill. Yeah. And so, so the more merino wool content we can put in, the longer you make it last, the smaller the impact you have left over in the landfill, right? Now, similarly, if I did not put a little bit of other fiber in there to reinforce it or make it stronger or make it last longer, now I've just got 5 merino garments in a landfill, and you have all the dye processes and all the other production things that it took to get it there. So those are all very important to us. And then kind of the other part of responsibility and the last part to kind of make it matter, I feel like in many ways the sustainability conversation always seeks to focus on the environmental impact, biodegradability, et cetera, which are great things. But I feel what's lost in that is kind of the responsible part of your community and responsible part of society. And so, one of the things we're really passionate about is we did set up our company in a small community. We do, provide jobs in that community. As we grew into Bozeman in our second retail location, we opened up a sew shop in Bozeman. We've got 3 jobs posted in Bozeman right now, right? And so this idea that that when you go into these smaller communities, we're not set up near Port City. We're set up in a small community. I mean, you really can have an impact that you can put your hands on, right? It's not as if you are, stroking a check to something that you know nothing about. It's the people probably that right? Mm-hmm. And for us, it's a really, really powerful thing from a responsibility standpoint.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of said that. The responsibility should be understood in the broadest possible sense. Impact and impacts, I think, should be understood in the broadest possible senses. And, increasingly, like we had this company, Wonder Alpine, it's based in Salt Lake City. They were just sitting here and, I was asking them the same question. And I kind of want to just now, anytime I'm talking with someone from a company, ask them. And I think we're in an interesting time where there is a heightened kind of peer pressure, I think I'll use that term, in terms of what are you doing to diminish that environmental impact? Mm-hmm. And we are asking companies that, and we want to know more on that front. But I think the reason I like asking the question is because we do hear more. There isn't just one or two or three lanes. There's 130.
Right.
And we're not all going to be getting A+ in every conceivable sense of doing things responsibly or, with the most reduced impact possible. And so I do think these are important things to ask, and hopefully we get real, genuine answers back, because it can also maybe motivate companies to be like, oh, we're not actually doing anything on that front. Maybe that's something we could think about and integrate. And that strikes me as the right kind of pressure to be putting on our whole industry in the broadest sense. Mm-hmm. The thing, though, I will say, there also means that we probably need a culture of generosity or charitability, and not so much a culture of hey, screw you, why isn't Voormi doing A, B, or C? Sure. It's well, dude, you're not doing, and I don't know. I both want a more charitable culture, and I want all of us to be trying to move forward in real ways.
Yeah, and I think the word real ways is kind of the context there, right? Because it's easy to make a brochure, a piece of marketing collateral that that ticks whatever box is important that day. It's easy to do that. It's easy to go set up whatever supply chain you need to meet a certain criteria. What I think is more important is that folks are just real about it. It's back to this idea that we all wake up every day as corporate leaders or as leaders in companies. We should seek to wake up and do the right thing, right? That's what's going to drive real, meaningful progress. And in the wake of that, we'll figure out how to systematize those things and make the right policies, the right certifications, all that kind of stuff. But if we're not waking up every day trying to do it better, then as a whole, we will never really get any better. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that.
So crystal ball time. We're thinking about Voormi 10 years from now. What do you foresee? What would you like this company to look like? What can you share with us?
Yeah, so it's an awesome question. It's something we, from a materials perspective, are obviously always challenging ourselves with. I think if we put that 10-year horizon out there, in a way, I'm back to this convergence of textiles and technology. We're at the point now where tech companies are making our cars, our dishwashers are connected to the internet. Everything has, if you will, been transformed by the integration of technology, whether that's advanced manufacturing techniques, whether that's integrated e-tech. I think our vision is that because this company was founded at that convergence of textiles and technology and wanting to see, really, if you will, the principles of one industry translate to another. I think our goal is to be at the forefront of that change. I mean, that's what we seek to do. There's some really cool things as you think about textiles getting smarter. Let's just talk about integrated electronics for a second. And this is the same build conversation we had. One of the things that we don't talk a lot about is what happens to electronic waste.
Yeah.
Right? How many iPhones do you have in your drawer that you don't throw away because you don't know what to do with, yet are still just piling up in your drawer? As technology and as our clothes continue to, as things continue to offer services, I think our clothes will too. We want to be at the forefront of that technology. We are doing things to be at the forefront of that technology in the background. It's going to create a potentially bigger problem, right? And that's what do we do with the impact, the overall ecological impact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where we think this bit around natural fibers and understanding sustainability and production and all the other things that kind of we've foundationally set up to do all come into play, right? And so, I think if you were to ask us crystal ball, what does things look like 10 years from now? I mean, I think the expectations you have in your clothing will be completely different. I think it'll offer you levels of services and connectivity that you've never experienced or expected out of your textiles. And I think leading the charge with a sustainably based approach and thinking about it from the perspective of a company rooted in the culture that we're rooted in versus necessarily kind of where a lot of that innovation is going to be driven from. I mean, I think it's all going to kind of come together, and we're really passionately focused on being ready when it comes and kind of being that lead company. And it's really bizarre or strange to maybe hear somebody who wakes up and makes high-E hoodies today talk about that. But it's what we've set the company up to do. It's why we developed a textile technology company that went on to build apparel, as opposed to developing an apparel company that went on to source fabrics.
Huh. A textile technology company. Yeah. That's a pretty good answer. I'm giving you a 10 out of 10 for that answer.
I've got 10 years to figure it out.
Yeah, apparently. Now you get to work. Yeah, that saying it was the easy part. Anything else we should touch on before I let you go?
No, I mean, unless you have anything else, I think it was great. I appreciate the ability to come in here and do this. We oftentimes spend a lot of our time, thinking about what's next. It's nice to be able to get it out and share what we think is next, for sure.
Well, thanks for coming by. This was fun and good to catch up. And I've really mostly that of all the stuff, just for me personally, that question of like, you pick some products that you personally want to talk about. I was very curious to see what you would come back with. And so, mission accomplished.
Great, so, I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks. And we'll look forward to seeing how you make the next decade happen, because it's all on tape now. We got you on tape.
Perfect.
So, all right, Tim.
All right. Thanks
Take
so
care.
much.